Hey Vasu, good evening. Thank you
Good
so much
evening.
for being here, and I'm looking forward to some of your words of wisdom. I
No, no,
hope
there are
I'm not
none.
putting any pressure on you, but some words of wisdom for from somebody who has been in the corporate space, who is still doing a lot of explorations, and have some fantastic books around yoga. And I also see you as a man of many, many avatars. And just before our interview, and I asked you, what are you currently doing, Vasu? You're telling me that you're trying to figure out as you grow up, and that's an interesting way to set the stage for you.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
Thanks,
I'm
Sripriyaa.
trying to,
Always a pleasure talking to you. We've had a few conversations before. Always
yes.
enjoyed it. So, yeah, be prepared for some fireworks and expect the unexpected.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And what better way to have a conversation around yoga with somebody who has kind of given something called Yoga Sutra Simplified, right? That's what is your title of
Yes.
one of your books. So I wanted to understand from you, Vasu. Everybody knows yoga, but there are very few people who actually make it as a daily habit.
True.
Now, from your vantage point, what could make people make this a daily habit?
Okay. Before I come to my answer, which will be not very nice to hear, let me say that yes, it's true. Everyone's heard of yoga, and I too had heard it in the sense that people have misheard it, which is the belief that doing a lot of physical activity is what is yoga, and that's not wrong. It's just not the complete picture. Of course, there's the larger philosophy of yoga and so on, which will make things a bit serious, but there's a spiritual angle to it, spiritual dimension, and so on. Of which asanas are the most visible segment. It's actually an 8-step process that Patanjali has laid out.
Yes.
Asanas just happen to be the most visible and most talked about, most, I would say, glamorous part of it.
Yes.
Now, your question was about how to start yoga. Is that what you just asked me?
Yes.
No,
It's just that many people know it, but don't bring it into as a daily habit, especially in the professional world, right? There's busyness.
yeah. Again, I think we have limited mental bandwidth, and unfortunately for us, we will not do yoga. I mean, we can keep on lecturing people that how yoga is useful for them, how it's a wonderful thing. Everyone knows, everyone nods their heads, and they postpone it for some thing which will happen in the indistinct future. One day I will do it. Okay, but that day is not now. I am so busy with X and Y, and this is a rat race that we have all willingly joined in, and we're always rushing from place to place, pretending to be busy and solving world problems. In in the process, many things we put aside, right? And in particular, the issue of looking after ourselves in terms of mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, this is relegated to some time in the future. So when you say you don't have time, it just means you're deep into the rat race, and you have not yet prioritized that this is actually an important thing for you to do. And therefore, any amount of lecturing from me and many more exalted individuals, not me necessarily, but people who are much wiser than me, for example, you can keep listening to them, but till something hits you, you won't do it. So it has to be a calling from within. Literally, it has to be an awakening from within. Any number of sermons are not going to make any difference.
Yes.
What we are seeing, of course, is accelerated aging. People are becoming older faster.
Yes.
All kinds of, and that's not only the way we look, but also obviously the things that are happening inside our bodies. We are literally, slowly disintegrating faster than normal. We always think it's never going to happen to me; it's going to happen to somebody else. So therefore we live in this bliss that I'll figure it out. Right now it's not a time, and maybe I'll do yoga once a week or twice a week, etc., or other asanas. Of course, that is missing the entire point. So I just think it's just that we are right now at a stage post COVID or even prior to COVID, we have really gone full blast in trying to search for some kind of elusive dream. I don't know whether it's material or whatever it is, but that's what we're running after. One day it will happen. This is by the way, it's not only of yoga. I must say this thing is true in my other experiences in music also, and you are also an accomplished dancer. You will know that we always talk about one glorious time when we were very young and teenagers, when we were doing all this thing. Then we claim that life took over, exams happened, career happened, and then we put all those things at the back, and then we try to revive it again much later. We say after retirement I'll go back to it. Frankly, they're just excuses. If those things are a priority for us, we will make time for it. Currently, yoga in the manner that you described is not a priority for many people.
Mm. True, true, true. But tell me, Vasu, I mean, from what are you observing? I mean, when you say it is not a priority, and you said there is some form of an irrational optimism that's surrounding most human beings. Um, well, there is still this, there is this hope, right? And when
Yeah.
you when we talk about that, what do you hope people to start inculcating in their daily lives that can slowly maybe wipe out this irrational optimism, because yoga can transcend the physical to the mental, emotional, and even at the spirit levels, right?
I think the fact is that there are a number of cliches that we just drop all the way. For example, somebody says, "I'm a foodie." They love to say that. I'm a foodie. I love doing this. Okay, it sounds cool. Then this whole thing of I must sleep. I can't get up early in the morning, etc. So these very beautiful stories we tell ourselves. But how do we get that finally into our lives? I think little by little, frankly, a discipline as simple as waking up early, which is very, very difficult initially. But once it becomes a habit, then actually the discipline of actually waking up early in the morning at 4:30 or something like that is a very beautiful thing, which unless you experience it yourself, you won't know. You probably think I'm talking nonsense. But getting up really early, 4 o'clock, 4:15, 4:30, and then finding yourself alone, there's no sound, there's nothing happening out there. You have time for yourself rather than waking up at 7 and rushing, from place to place, realizing that you're late, there's a bus to catch, there's a train to catch, etc. That's going to overwhelm you. But slowly developing a habit of waking up, trying your best. Maybe next week, I'll wake up half an hour early. A month later, I'll wake up. So it's about building a habit. And then when you have that free time available, right, you suddenly your mind goes to the more beautiful things in life. Yoga being one of them, for sure. But if you have gotten into this thing that I wake up, I sleep late, I must wake up late, yoga weekend ko karenge, then this yoga in the form, it's just a casual kind of a hobby, and it has no particular meaning. And we all have casual hobbies. In the case that you're describing, it happens to be one of them. But again, the habit is of, frankly, disciplining yourself to try to sleep half an hour earlier, waking up half an hour earlier as well. Over time, suddenly this quiet, this period of quiet lends itself as a perfect platform, kind of a fertile bed, where these kinds of beautiful practices like yoga start making a lot more sense, in my opinion.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, you're a musician and you also play instruments. So, and as a dancer, sometimes there is, I mean, when we say yoga is a way of life, and yoga is a state of mind as well, right? So,
Yeah.
how can people really understand the state of mind? We say, sometimes a restless mind is the root cause of all your troubles, but a calm mind will liberate you. How should a busy professional interpret this, and what should they do, Pasu?
Uh, the answer is both easy and difficult. So first of all, let me say that to a very nice reference. Patanjali, in fact, says so in the first couple of lines. He says, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which means essentially having a complete calm mind, which is a rephrasing of what you just said. But I think, what I would say is our ability to abstract ourselves from our day-to-day activities is really very, very probably the root of it, which means essentially, Sripriyaa, observing Sripriyaa, for example, right? And or the daily chaos of life, or the way we respond, the way we talk, or the way we hyperventilate, the way we raise our voice, the way we get affected by events. How are we able to abstract ourselves from those set of experiences and come up and see what exactly am I doing? The power of abstraction is actually not that difficult to cultivate, but it does require some time to understand, which means measuring our responses carefully, taking a breath before responding, and so on. It takes time. It's not actually difficult, but it sounds difficult. I think when you start doing that, you actually buy a little more time. Your mind actually starts slowly realizing that many of your responses are unwarranted. Let me just tell you that when I was a young man, I was actually very, very, impulsive, right? Impulsive. And I think at that age, lack of maturity, lack of experience, you felt that that's how you have to respond. It's all about being a leader, is to constantly be on the fast track, etc. Obviously, with time, suppose that you get a bit of wisdom, and it's not really required. A response is not always required. So cultivating this, essentially, in my opinion, means our ability to think very carefully before responding, and somehow imagine a drone over your head. You're just going up and looking down and seeing, why am I doing what am I doing? Is this response really warranted? And so on. So that kind of self-discipline is possible. Where you measure your words very, very carefully, think 100 times before saying thing or doing something, and especially when you are likely to be angry, right, about something. Is there a way in which you can say that I'm about to get angry? Is it really worth it? And then when the actual asking that question itself reduces that anger. Not to say that I'm a saint. Even today, I'll tell you that there are occasions when I do indeed get angry, and I'm not necessarily proud of it. But I think, like I said, if we are totally in the grip of these emotions, whether we grip of our stomach or a grip of our senses, or definitely in the grip of our emotions, then if you're not able to control that, then the journey is going to be very, very difficult. So it is very necessary to abstract yourself away from your routine experiences and start seeing things as those as some kind of a dramatic play that's happening.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's also essential when we are learning to thrive amidst chaos, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Well, I mean, when you looking at the physical dimensions, right? Like we as human beings, our body is designed for not sitting. We're supposed to be designed for movement.
Yeah.
But we sit for many hours, 6 to 8 hours at least bare minimum every day. Now, how can yoga as a practice help here to kind of?
Well, obviously the data and empirical evidence that you have and I have is really quite grim, right? I mean, people at the age of 20, 22, see them, they can't twist, they can't turn, they can't bend, they bend, So again, going back to the earlier point about being the rat race, so you are in that till something bad happens to you. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that, till something really hits you, all the beautiful things that you and I are saying right now will have no meaning at all, because you think you're above all that, right? So you will have to find ways in which to realize that what you're doing in this rat race. People are, like I said, people accelerate aging. People are having heart attacks in their 20s. They're getting older faster, right? And so it is a terrible price that we are paying. And to imagine that we are somehow immune from that and somebody else's issue is a very ridiculous thing to be under the impression of. So again, even here, the ability to abstract ourselves, what am I doing? Is it really necessary for me to have this extraordinary lifestyle? Okay, right there in a meeting, in a heated meeting, can I again try our best to control my senses, control my responses? Can I make it a practice of having different kinds of furniture, for example, which doesn't force which forces me to actually get up, or rather, I'm not forced to sit down. And obviously things like diet and so on and so forth. But I'm afraid again, that these things are not necessarily new. I'm not saying anything that's new. It is an individual person's journey, and probably an organization that has to create a certain environment which encourages more physical activity and fewer, or maybe mandates that you cannot possibly be sitting at a particular place for long periods of time. I think that could be happening around the corner. What with AI happening and a whole lot of other jobs being now, so-called desk routine jobs, maybe they'll be going somewhere else. So I'm hoping that the positive result of all those things might be that we may end up spending less time at our desk and maybe looking at the finer things in life. One of which is, of course, exerting ourselves, not exerting ourselves, but making sure that all parts of our physical being are being tested, and they're not allowing ourselves to be static. Now, one of the things that you may have certainly noticed, and is that when you do yoga, the very first time, talking about the asanas, we will experience a lot of pain. Okay, and the pain, so many people probably drop out thinking it's just too painful. It's just not worth it. I'm not prepared to bear it. But actually, what's happening is it's your muscles which have been hitherto neglected, which are crying out, perhaps in relief, but certainly they're saying, "Wow, you finally discovered me. I've been here all this time." And so, therefore, that ability of being consistent, waking up early and spending 45 minutes, no matter what, I don't care what it is, that is probably going to save you. But how is that going to happen? Well, that is, again, as I said, a journey that everyone has to experience. And again, I think offices, organizations have got a responsibility now to mandate a healthier lifestyle, not just about diet, but in the, as you said, sitting down, somehow from, not allowing meetings to be beyond a certain amount of time, not allowing people to sit at the desk for long periods of time. It may have to actually come down to that level.
Yes, yes, true. I mean, when we look at yoga, even at a physical dimension, how is
Yeah.
it? I mean, are there any merits like this? Every form of a physical activity or an exercise is nothing is wrong. I mean, and it's good. But how should and but we look at yoga as more holistic. And why do we say that,
Yes.
Vasu?
Well, because actually it is part of a continuum that Patanjali has expressed. Now remember, this is actually ultimately, yoga is union with God, etc. So there's a whole spiritual dimension that we talk about. But the asana part is the third step technically of the whole eight step process, and it's essentially talking about building that capability within yourself to meditate for long periods of time. And how do we do that? By quietening our mind. So for those who don't know, who would be listening to this video, we the first he talks about our external behavior, how we should interact with the world, and he recommends 3 or 4 very beautiful ways in which. So that's called yama. Then our internal discipline. How do we take ourselves? How should we behave? Self-study, austerity, all those kinds of things. You're talking niyama. So that's again, this is called the mellowing of the mind. This is my terminology. Third is the asanas, where we're preparing the body. Though we think of it as physical fitness, in my opinion, the objective is actually a little more than that. Then we talk about, it becomes more subtle, pranayama, where it's about managing our breath, which is again a very beautiful set of activities. The next is about managing our senses very well. Then we talk about now we are ready at this point. This is a mind, everything has been prepared. We have certainly reached a certain level of stable, beautiful bliss. We now in a position to start meditating. That's actually, so you can't just sit down and start meditating for long periods of time. That's a fallacy, because the whole issue of cultivating, preparing, etc., is going to take you a tremendous amount of time. So I think that's where this comes in. Now, other point that I want to also make is that it is true that these asanas are very beautiful, etc. But one of the things he mentions, I believe it is in the second chapter of the Yoga Sutras, is Sthira Sukha Asana, which means essentially that whatever asana you do, which it is actually your ability to stay in that position for an extended period of time and just be there, no matter how complex it is there, just be there for a long period of time. That itself develops a whole bunch of focus, your ability to focus. I even today, I certainly have a lot of challenges. I don't claim that I'm perfect in any way, not at all. But certain asanas you enjoy, you be there in that so-called complex position for a long period of time, breathing normally, etc. It certainly creates a sense of great discipline within ourselves. So as I mentioned, asana is only the third, a very important step, but there's a larger purpose, a larger goal.
Yes, yes. What's the path forward when somebody gets into a daily practice of yoga? How can they? How does it reflect in their leadership, Vasu?
Well, that's a $1 million question. Again, I'll go back to the thing which I now have started realizing, and I've spoken about it just earlier. Is first of all, because your mind has gone through this whole process of, like I said, the steps of yoga, etc. Your ability to abstract, looking at the big picture, I think gets fine tuned. I think it gets fine tuned. Second is, I think our ability to see things as though it's a kind of a beautiful play allows you to be less reactive in the manner in which you respond to situations. So the same thing that might upset you maybe a year ago because you want to immediately take some action, you may be able to actually step back a little bit and see things in a slightly different way. And also, we did the realization appears first, and this is mentioned very clearly. I'm pretty sure in the first part of the Yoga Sutras, is that the first sign of an unquiet mind also is a labored breath. The breathing actually starts changing. So when you're observing yourself. I am outside myself. I'm watching myself. I'm observing that my breathing has been affected, and I'm able to therefore control it. So these are the kinds of things that I think are eminently possible to do. But again, in terms of leadership, as I said, these are important qualities. Remember, leader who reacts constantly, I don't think gives confidence to his people. At the same time, I will also say that it does in fact inject tremendous energy in the activities that the person does. Now, if the idea of yoga is to simply sit in the corner like a monk and meditate, that's different. But in the context that we're talking about, where we have to make a living and so on, and this is a requirement of leaders as well, the ability to be very rational, have a very clear, decisive mind, right? And again, abstract yourself and radiate a certain energy which people notice. You may yourself not be able to know it, but a person who does yoga regularly has indeed an aura around him which others can sense. He himself may not be concerned about it, but it is there. So I think that those are the kinds of things that are going to happen. Abstracting yourselves, being able to create a buffer between you and the event, demonstrating more energy, and people therefore like to be around such a person because they feed off that energy in a good way.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. I mean, you were talking about breathing, and that's a very important aspect of, I mean, I think it even goes above the asanas, right, when it comes to
Indeed.
breathing.
Mm.
So we say breathing is both an art and science because
Mm.
you need, I mean, it as much as it is natural, which is why we exist in a way, but it's
Mm.
also can be scientifically or using science how we can control it or practice it in a way that it can benefit us even more, right? There are different ways breathing is interpreted these days. How can
Indeed.
leaders understand this, and what are some specific breathing practices that you would recommend for leaders, Vasu?
Again, it is too much for me to claim that I have the answer for these very important questions, and I don't presume to do so. But I will tell you this: that we know from data from the world, from the natural world, that the animals that breathe very very slowly live longer. It's as simple as that, right? So therefore, a leader's ability to realize that his breathing has changed, the pattern has changed, he's breathing faster, therefore means he also understands that he's in a grip of something he needs to control very well. So I think this business of really making specific efforts to slow down your breathing has a long range effect that actually makes greater use of your lungs. I have read a number of places that we hardly use the actual capacity of our lungs. We do a very poor job of using what the lungs can actually do. So being aware then of the labor of the actual movement, the subtle movement of air through our nostrils down into our lungs, which by the way, all our lives we take for granted. Now all of a sudden our mind has turned towards this whole practice of the air entering your system, going, etc., etc. Again, it immediately pulls you back from the rough and tumble of everyday life. So that is a huge advantage that you're actually going to have, because you are then going to be seen as a relatively calm, balanced, and logical person who does things in a way that's acceptable. Whereas a hyperventilating, fast track, type A personality kind of leader may win the battle, but will lose the war. So I think being aware of changes in your breathing cycle, and then finding 3 or 4 different pranayama techniques, at least for, let's say, 20 minutes to half an hour, if you have to make the time for yourself, I think will indeed have a long-term effect.
Beautiful, beautiful. We were talking about this earlier as well, Vasu, which is about the irrational optimism that people
Yeah.
sometimes adopt when it comes to looking at their any
Yeah.
of their practices or any aspect of their life, which is health or anything. I mean, it's
Mm.
something that it wouldn't affect me, kind of a state of
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
What's an advice that you would give to leaders who take their health for granted?
Um, uh, every other day, I end up talking to people who are, very consumed by the titles, for example. And that's again, it is part of a brainwashing that starts at a very early age. There are all these wrong role models we have of career progression with better and better titles, better and better levels. So it's a treadmill that is going to end really, really badly. But again, no matter what advice I would give to say that, what is it? What is at the end of the day? Many great saints have talked about this. You have come empty-handed. You will leave empty-handed. So there are tons of philosophy. I'm hardly qualified to talk about that. But I think ultimately, if a secure leader who trusts the judgment of his people, doesn't micromanage them, and takes pride and celebrates the achievements of those who report to him, etc. then I think when the person reaches that level, for him again, yoga makes a lot more. So it works. It goes in both direction. A secure leader will realize the importance of yoga very, very easily. On the other hand, developing a kind of a yogic routine also enables that person to become more secure in his dealing with the outside world. So that's what I would say is that, are you secure as a leader, and what does the security mean? Are you really hunting for endless career progression? Is the money that you're going to make never enough? What is it that is keeping you restless? So if you're able to think through that, and then step back and consider the larger picture, again, easier said than done, but we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And I've seen this, by the way, at a certain age in many leaders. They suddenly start talking about their social purpose. Let me give back to society. Let me give back to society. But and again, one of the things about going to spiritual studies is they say this is how life should be lived. And invariably, who are those people who are doing studies? The vast majority of them tend to be people who passed their working life. So they missed it. Okay, now they want to lecture to everybody else as how they should be living. So I think that these lessons of how to conduct oneself through various kinds of breathing techniques and so on should be learned early. They should be taught in management school. Those kinds of things where we don't even talk about it. We think of them as something cute to be as an optional. But learning this earlier is certainly going to benefit you in the longer term.
Wonderful, absolutely, I agree. I mean, any of these things, if it can be seeded at an early age or an early
Yes.
stage in one's life and career, I mean, it's going to have a far greater impact, and we have the ability to make the world more sustainable.
In the Yama and Niyama part of the Yoga Sutras, there's a whole lot of talking about not coveting anything. Not coveting. Don't covet. Don't want it. Also, one of the things that is talked about: don't desire wealth. To live in austerity. Do not want anything. And somewhere I read about this, that the person who shuns wealth is indeed very wealthy, because in fact he doesn't want it, and therefore people trust him with their wealth and things like that. So again, the ability to realize what is really important. Unfortunately, that journey is unique and personal to everybody, right? But again, the person who reads a lot and develop a sense of security in the way he conducts himself, sure of himself, can easily understand this and follow up very. But unfortunately, I think very honestly, we have seen many times that being very macho, very tough, like a gorilla kind of thing. I'm the greatest, etc. And using a lot of cliched high, management terminology to berate the people sometimes, or be very, very tough. You see people saying, companies saying we value our people, etc., etc. But we also know that in fact, the evidence points exactly the opposite. So somehow, when will that gap reduce? I really don't know. But again, a secure leader treats his people with a great deal of compassion, and gives them credit for many things. So developing that mindset is automatically going to feed back into a yogic lifestyle, so to say.
Wonderful, wonderful. Vasu, I wanted to ask you before we, sign off from this interview, what is your uh, journey that brought you into this? I mean, because you were a busy corporate leader yourself,
Hmm.
and you've been traveling across the world to make a difference at work. And now, when did this practice start, or did it start when something hit you? What's the story from
Yeah.
your?
See, I must say that I was very, very fortunate that I happened to be introduced to music very, very early in my life, right? As a young child, and I had a liking for it, and I've been lost in music for many periods of time. So one can even say that's a different kind of yoga in the sense, when you take a single note and you get infinite pleasure from just playing that note or listening to that. That is a very personal thing that can't be explained. So if I were to say that, have I had those yogic experiences, I would say actually yes. Certain rags, certain kinds of notes do vibrate in a certain way that gives you a feeling which is extraordinary. But if you're talking about the conventional yogic journey, I would say that yes, of course, I was also impatient. I was a hot-tempered young man. I was reactive, responsive, etc. Certainly, as a couple of events, certainly put some cold water on my head, right, and made me realize what is really important. And then I would give credit to my father, my late father, who forced me to go to a school of yoga in Jayanagar, Bangalore. And that was a very turning point. Now, of course, I had gone for yoga classes before, but it was the same way. Others are going for yoga. let me also go. I hadn't put any thought into it. But a couple of obviously some events, happened, and my dad insisted that I should go to this place, and I did. And luckily for me, these guys were, fairly tough and not rough, but tough, and had a very disciplined way of doing yoga. And I needed that at that point in my life. So therefore, that really turned things around. And obviously, in parallel, I was doing a lot of writing and so on, right? So when I got introduced to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, certainly I think it came at the right time. I needed to have some kind of a proper reference, some kind of a surety. If you ask me, that is one of the foundational, classics of our civilization, and it's only 196 or 197 shlokas, in which the entire universe's wisdom is packed in very, very beautifully. So yes, it requires, unfortunately, for many people, some kind of a turning point, unless you're very blessed from a very early age. But normally, it has to hit you, and something has to happen to your life, where you suddenly turn to these things, and hopefully you find an answer or teacher somewhere there who says maybe yoga is the answer for all these kinds of things. That has happened to me as well. But again, because I was fortunate enough to have music in my life, and I would like to write stuff as well. So somehow I was able to put it all together, and then yoga started developing its own, it started radiating a certain beauty, which I appreciate.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, we are having this conversation. It's perhaps almost, I don't know, 9:45 in Bangkok. You're in Bangkok,
Yes,
Basu, and
I'm there at the moment.
or
Yes.
it's like around 10:45 in the night. Now, I mean, and we are having the conversation. And did you have a practice of yoga this morning that's given you the energy to be here and be present?
Yes, I did. But of course, today specifically, no, because I was flying in from Delhi. But every day I did do that. I absolutely have been doing that day after day, year after year. It has been, and that's something I absolutely have to do, no matter what. So that's good. And it's not that I'm, unnecessarily dogmatic about it. It's just that it's just like brushing your teeth. You have to get onto the mat. There's a certain sequence I've developed. I'm not necessarily saying that sequence of those things are right. It just happens to be something I'm used to doing. So it's a series of activities that I do in the morning, centered around asanas and breathing and so on. And I've been following it now for years and years and years and years. And it's definitely had its dividends. Let me, in fact, share with you that at this very moment, I'm suffering from a lot of very severe knee problems. Okay, right now. Now, so the question that gets asked is, well, how come you've been doing yoga, and then how come you have a knee problem? To which my answer is that obviously it's part of the natural process of it's not going to solve every physical problem. However, I would say that if I had not been doing yoga, the situation would have been 1,000 times worse. You know, so I think that is the factor. This is not going to demoralize me or demotivate me from doing my daily thing. I'm obviously making certain adjustments, but the pleasure you get from doing that, I mean, well, I won't say pleasure, but a certain contentment, a certain satisfaction of doing it every day on the dot. Again, that is a personal journey. And people do give up pretty fast because they don't like to get up early. They don't like to be told that you have to sleep early. Everyone's path. So they have to hit a particular situation. Then maybe these things start making sense.
Wonderful.
Otherwise, we can always do yoga, like we have International Yoga Day. At least that's reminding us that there is, in fact, a larger purpose to our life.
Yes.
Why we exist at all, why we born. Those metaphysical questions, everyone's been obsessed by trying to answer it. Well, we also should spend time thinking about that. And maybe by doing these daily yoga, asana practice, pranayama, etc., you develop a certain rigor, certain discipline that gives you the platform to address those questions.
Yes, yes. I mean, I certainly agree because when you said a knee problem, and I got back to dancing after 25
Yes.
years. So
Yes.
I do have I'm in the same boat, but at a different age, of course. I'm much, much older. But what it has taught me is, had I not been having a regular practice,
Yes.
right, I wouldn't be anywhere even close to being able to give a performance. And
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
not that I don't have a problem, but keeping at it, right, is going to be important, and not giving up and saying that is going to be an excuse for me not to
That's
practice
right. That's
yoga.
right. That's right.
So I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I mean. I certainly believe that what you do on the mat can have multifold impact to life
Oh,
off
there's no
the mat.
doubt.
right?
There's no
So
doubt.
on the mat is just a 20 minutes or a 30 minutes practice, but doing it every day in a disciplined manner can make life off the mat meaningful. Absolutely.
Yes, and again, going back to the workplace, as I said, right, there is a certain kind of decisiveness that I realize that I have, and a certain kind of ability to close things, or to start things and then close it in a particular way. So those kinds of things I've developed over time. I probably don't leave things hanging, but I know I can pace myself well. I can make sure certain tasks that I've planned to do for today gets done well and properly. There's great clarity that develops while doing certain things. Great clarity that has happened over a period of time, for sure,
Absolutely,
because of yoga. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And when we, as we say, the future belongs to the
Mm,
right? It's all about the creativity,
mm.
the finer aspects that we bring into our workplaces when everything else is going to be driven around technology,
Yeah,
right? So I think having that creative stroke or that spark requires us to have some of these daily practices,
feel
and
so.
people who inculcate it may see a far better future.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's been a pleasure, Vasu, having this conversation with you. I'm
Thank you so
grateful.
much.
As you rightly said, everybody is making noise around International Yoga Day, and perhaps our noise is also there. But maybe each noise kind of makes it a bigger, voice for change.
I think so.